Hello, welcome to part 7 of the Abridged Cherokee campaign. Last time we were fighting our war with the French and they did take some territory from us, although we were able to counterattack and take it back with a nice easy victory. Then they invaded us again but didn't get to any of our territory this time. We reinforced and took down their army before it could do any damage, and with that done we started attacking them. We defeated another army as we marched north and ended up managing to take one of their settlements, and now we just want to continue that momentum. Our main obstacle to advancing is not the French army right now, it's just the dirty Europeans not wanting to be part of our glorious tribe. So I'm going to have to leave some of the army behind to keep those guys under control back in Montreal, while we take what we can to go and attack Quebec. We don't have a definitive advantage or anything, but that's probably for the best because it means we can just stand here and the enemy will sally against us, and indeed they do. And since they have mortars, that's just nice because it means we can be the defender and move out of the mortar range right at the start like we usually do. The battle took place over this gigantic hill, and that's going to help us out quite a bit. My strategy is to have the musketmen and cav on the left while all the infantry are on the right. We'll try and draw the enemy over to the left to come down our side of the hill, and then our infantry can go up to the top and will be behind and above the enemy army. That's the idea, at least. Their mortars, of course, can shoot over the hill, so it's not going to protect us from those guys, but it will provide some very good protection from their flatter artillery, like these regular 7-pounder guns I think they are. And you can see they are influenced right now by the high quality leadership of a certain Dark Lord who's featured in some of my previous campaigns. They are just blasting the hillside and their own men with reckless abandon. They did also have some howitzers, and howitzers can actually shoot over this hill just about because they arc the shots a little bit more. So there we can see I'm falling back to the edge of the map to get out of mortar range. My commander, who is always visible to the enemy, I was trying to hide in a spot where the cliffs on the side of the hill would stop him being in range, or within line of sight I should say, of the enemy's artillery. Didn't work, so I had to run to the corner of the map to get him to safety, being shot at all the way and losing a whole bunch of men, unfortunately. But at least my overall plan does appear to be working. You can see they're coming down the hill towards my cav and muskets, and we've got all the warriors ready to fold around and make that rear attack once the time is right. The French started their attack on my baiting force with their mortar team, the classic strategy, and interestingly it kind of worked. They actually ran through all of my musket fire. It's because the mortar team's quite a small target, so they can actually take multiple volleys and sometimes not take casualties from it, or very many casualties, so works in a sense, but they're not going to achieve anything now they're in melee. And as you can see, we have now come around to be behind the enemy's main body of units. They did see us, of course, at this point, so they're going to try and reform, but they don't have time. We're going to very rapidly charge in and get these melees going. So that's going to be our strategy, effectively. We just need to win those melees, and we should be able to with the hill advantage on our side. There could have been a nasty moment here when their cavalry kind of charged into the flank of one of my moving units, but it seemed like their charge didn't apply and they just ended up dying instead, so that was nice. And here, getting a nice rear attack on some militia who are trying to escape. They won't be able to escape in this case. Their general was killed in that cavalry unit, so that's nice, and my own cav are taking out the enemy's artillery at the back. Now my general can come back into things to take revenge, going to get a nice rear attack on some infantry there, and just generally speaking we're overcoming everything. We're going to swarm these enemy units. They're going to rout pretty easily because they're all separated, easy to surround, and their army is being destroyed, so the morale will be dropping constantly. We took out everything that came onto our side of the hill. Their artillery was then moving up for some reason to perhaps try and rescue the situation, but our cav dealt with that, and that's going to bring the battle to an end. Very low losses, pretty much destroyed the enemy army, everything went to plan overall, so with that we're probably going to get Quebec by the looks of things. There were just a few militia still alive. I gave them the chance to surrender. They decided not to take it, so we killed them instead. Not sure what their plan there was exactly. So now we've taken Quebec, and we've taken an artillery depot as well, so we may be able to make the weird Native American cannon unit if we can get everything up together here. Going to rebuild the observatory since the people will like that, and we'll have to destroy the state stuff so we can put our Native American administration building in there. As you can see, we've captured a school, so we can start researching things now, although most of our research, it's just passive bonuses, so nothing too exciting, but might as well get them. Not sure if we can even use all of them because some of them are for things like loom building, so I'm not sure we can even make. Anyway, with that sorted out, I started to think we don't really want to be at war with France anymore. This is a nice stopping point. We need to have our armies just sit around to replenish and to rebuild public order. So I thought maybe we can just stop. There are 2 more French settlements off to the east, but I don't really want them. So I decided to offer the French some peace and see what they would think about that. It would also be quite nice to trade with them, because I might be able to trade not through my trading port with them here and actually make some money. They were willing to take peace if I gave them Lower Louisiana. That's an okay deal, because keeping the stuff I just took from them would give me much more money than having Lower Louisiana would. But of course we want to keep everything, because we're not going to admit any kind of defeat in this war. Tried to trick them with a military access deal, but no, they really want Louisiana. So that's the end of our peace dreams. In the next turn, however, I learned that we're going to have to focus on something else anyway. It looks like New Spain want to get things going back down here. An army's approaching from Mexico. They've got artillery, they've got native troops and some actual line infantry there. And to defend against it, we've got the army that I very deliberately left under strength in order to save money. Now I'm going to rapidly try and rebuild it, but there's no time. It takes 2 turns to get your men back. And the new Spanish forces attack right now, and they do have the advantage there. Not so lucky with the terrain this time, nothing to hide behind. That means we are just going to get shot by the artillery. You can see I've split my army into a bigger group and a smaller group off to the flank while our cavalry sneaks away. We need to move backwards just to try and avoid a bit of the artillery fire, but that's not really going to work in this case because we're already close to the edge of the map and the enemy have deployed near the middle, so we're going to be in range most of the time. We'll just have to walk up and down to dodge it essentially, and that is moderately successful. Now something strange happened a little bit later. I noticed my bowmen off on the left weren't hiding for some reason, and it's because the enemy actually have their own native auxiliaries way ahead of the rest of the army, and they can see me, so that's why I can't hide. So we're going to have to come out of our hidden position to go and fight these guys. There's some more over here I noticed, and I was effectively baited out into a fight. I charged out to engage them, discovered that there's actually 4 or 5 native units that they've sent way ahead of the rest of the army for some reason. I'm pretty happy to just engage them right now, since this may allow us to defeat some of them before everything else catches up and make life easier in general. We're not going to have much of an advantage in terms of quality, but we have local numerical advantage for the time being at least, so we can see what we can do with that. And we've still got our reserves waiting off to the side to react to how the rest of the Spanish army actually deploys itself. We'll have some time before the infantry really come into play, but the cavalry will arrive sooner, of course, and here we see an example of how powerful cavalry can be. They slam into the front of one of my warrior units, killing absolutely loads of them. This routs the unit and more will then die as they try to escape, and we lost our chance to rear flank the blob of enemies just to the side there. So that's not very nice. That cav unit's going to go on to hit more of our troops, no doubt. The battles between our warriors and their warriors are going to be, as you might expect, indecisive. Neither side having the advantage. We have to hope to try and use maneuver to support our troops at some point, but on our left the enemy's gunners cause my cav to have to fall back, so we're not making much progress there. On the right I'm deploying my reserve units, but a lot of these units had to turn off to deal with the as yet uncommitted new Spanish units who are still coming into the fight. Here just about charged some militia. They almost routed me with a volley just as I hit them, but we're going to get the melee that we want. And here getting a nice attack on 2 sides with some line infantry, and we'll just hope that we'll grind through them and potentially defeat them later on in the fight, because we can't really support those men out there. Really looking to try and get something going in the centre, where our big blob of committed units here are fighting a winning fight, but we need them to win it faster so we can go and support the other fights which aren't necessarily going so well. Here my cav on our left do finally get into action, slamming through an enemy unit of line infantry and actually really quickly defeating them, and that meant I could go on to look for more targets. I'm going to pass by that smaller melee there and try and go for the bigger one. We experienced a glitch that I thought only affected the AI. Sometimes when the AI tries to charge something, it does it in an L shape. I presume it's some sort of script to try and force the AI to flank things, but it actually affected me there, where my men did a weird zigzag pattern before actually going in to make the attack. So that attack was successful. It causes routes and frees up lots of our units, and that's going to be very important. We managed to win over here with a 3-on-1 against one of the enemy warrior units, and with that we're going to start taking control of the battlefield again. On the right it's a mixed bag. We've won a couple of the fights, but here where it's a 1-on-1, warriors versus militia, you can see that while militia are bad, they're apparently not that bad, because they're not really losing any more men than we are in this fight. It's a little bit embarrassing for our troops, and it might just be because the difficulties on hard, the enemy's melee stats are being buffed. We're meant to be able to win a fight like that, suffice to say, so it's a shame to see if that really is what the difficulty level is doing to us. Anyway, we're now going to charge forwards and start engaging the last of the new Spanish units that hadn't been committed quite yet, and we'll have the numbers on our side now. I'm using my cav to lock these line infantry down so they can't fire at us while I advance, and now everything just charges into the mass melee to start getting the job done, and the nearby line infantry get drawn into the melee as well. I tried to use my cav to attack the enemy here, but they went through a unit of routing enemy cav, and that kind of ruined their charge, so it wasn't the best attack, but stops the enemy from firing, so that is all nice. Now, regrettably, my commander actually died in this melee, only seconds before the unit routed. If he'd lasted just a few moments more, he would have got away with that, and that's a shame because that was a pretty decent high-level commander. But at least this battle looks like it's now going to be won. Just a few enemies left and we can surround and pound them to cause a rout, and that brings an end to things pretty soon. We lost half of our army overall, so hefty casualties, but the enemy army has been effectively disabled, so our defense has been successful. We won't be able to counter-attack, of course, with this very damaged force at our disposal, but hopefully the Spanish won't come back anytime soon. The new Spanish, I should say. Going to throw a new general in there just to lead things, and we are going to let those new Spanish survivors go, since I don't really care enough to go after them and hunt them down. So now we'll just start rebuilding ourselves in the area, and now suddenly things look a lot better. I've just time-skipped many turns because effectively nothing happened. We just waited around on all fronts. But now I've gathered up a pretty sizable army here in Texas, including some reinforcements who came down from the French front to join the army here, because I do want to go and attack New Spain, because their next province over, which is also called New Spain, I believe, Mexico basically, is extremely rich, and if they don't rebuild their army very soon, we'll have a chance to take it now, although there's really no guarantee of that whatsoever. We're just going to walk in and see what happens with pretty much the best army we can field at the moment. Hopefully they'll be able to achieve something down there and make us a load of money in the process. Back up north, I also wanted to go on the offensive. Things have calmed down in terms of public order, so we can move out by untaxing people, since we also seem to have some money somehow at the moment. I guess it's from taking these colonies in particular. So with that sorted, I can take these armies and try and take another French colony. As I said, I don't really want those other French colonies, but we might as well take them just to remove the threat that one day something will come from them to attack us. So it's a long road, but we'll start marching it. On the road to Mexico, we did meet the new Spanish survivors from that previous battle, actually, by the looks of things. It appears to be the same sort of units. I thought obviously we're going to win, that's an auto-resolve, but I don't trust it, so always laying down the save just in case it gives you some disastrous result. But indeed that was okay, so we've saved ourselves some time, they just run off, and now we can continue on next turn towards Mexico. Back up north, though, there was some bad news. The French appeared with a fleet nearby carrying a load of militia, and it looks like it's going to be coming down towards Quebec. There's a dock nearby they could land at, and then they could attack Quebec in the same turn. In principle, I could go back with the army I've sent out on the offensive to defend against this, but I wanted to continue my offensive anyway and try and just cheekily stop this if I could, because I do have some units around and it is only militia, so we might be able to get away with this. I'm going to move the units up from Montreal, who don't really need to be there anymore, to defend Quebec, since that's most likely where the French are going, and we can recruit a couple of units as well to add on to that and overall have something to defend defend, while our main force in the area just goes on to attack. There was actually an army inside the settlement, but it's mostly militia, as you can see, a militia stack, so a little bit less threatening than its size might suggest, although we did also see that militia on their own can be formidable if you can't get them to rout, so may have to take a tiny bit of care. Anyway, we'll just leave the siege going here. Since the enemy have an advantage, they'll just sally, so that'll allow us to dodge the mortar fire a tiny bit easier. Meanwhile, we go and start a siege as well down at Mexico. Luckily, no big army or anything inside. They've got a few units, some line infantry, but also some units that are easier to ignore, like mob and militia, so overall this fight looks okay. We'll need to siege them out because they have forts. We really want them to attack us just to get rid of that whole complication. Moving on, the French do land their militia right next to Quebec, so it seems like something's going to happen there, but they can't do it this turn. They can, though, do this sally as expected, and now the balance bar's evened out now that we're on the defensive. So it's time to try and maul all of these militia all at once. Sadly, the battle replay was completely messed up even from the very beginning, so I'm going to use the live footage for this one. My plan is something familiar, hopefully, by this point. I've got most of the infantry hidden in this little walled enclosure over here, and everything else will just try and draw the enemy to be beside it so we can then flank attack them. For some reason, though, their general came out ahead of the army, perhaps to scout our position or something, so I thought, well, might as well attack him then. I sent the lancers forwards to start chasing him. He was kind of moving back towards the rest of his army, but not really, so we're going to have a pretty good chance to take out their general right away. The main problem I actually faced in achieving this was just getting my men to engage them, or perhaps more specifically, getting the enemy to engage me. You can see the French unit is just trying to walk away. I think this is why the replay was corrupted. This unit is acting in a bugged fashion or something. They're trying to leave the battlefield, I expect, or some nonsense. Anyway, we ended up chasing them all the way to the line. They kind of bounced off it and started running back towards the other side of the battlefield. And finally, we killed enough of them as they walked through us to get that commander. So that's a good start. The enemy's low morale will now be exacerbated by the fact they're going to have lower morale after that. So with that sorted, we go back to our original plan of trying to draw the enemy into position for a flank attack. Once they got a bit closer, I started advancing towards them and kind of noticed they probably knew that I had all of my infantry hidden off to the flank. I think they weren't all hidden all the time because they're starting to form an echelon, or at least it looks like it, on the left flank. I'm interpreting the AI as doing something to counter me. This may actually just be some random behavior, but whatever the case, it caused me to think, well, let's just charge them right now, because if they're still reforming, we can make the charge with lower risk of getting shot. My lancers seem to have aggroed a few militia over there into the corner of the map, so we'll just fight them separately. The main fight's going to be right here. I'm going to get my musketmen to charge forward so that we can get some flank attack bonuses going, since the enemy are kind of turning to face our main attack coming from the west there. On the end of our line, I'm actually going to be able to outflank the enemy again and go for a rear attack, since the enemy formation kind of clumped together. And here you can see the cavalry engagement. We just ran into the nearby militia pretty successfully, throwing a general in there as well to add to the damage. Once those cav finish up, we'll be in a pretty good position, since they can come back and support this engagement. A few enemy units sneaking away from the fight there, so the guys I had coming around to make a rear attack are going to have to fight those guys instead, so that they don't start shooting into the melees and causing morale shocks that may actually make our units leave. There's the cav engagement being won effectively. Stuff starts going away. Now we can overwhelm the survivors, and you would think having all those free cav would really help, but I'm not actually going to use them as it turns out, because, well, A, I didn't really need to, since an infantry attack started turning the battle in our favour, and B, because making a cavalry rear attack on the enemy might end up killing a whole load of our own men. So we're going to play it safe and not do it. We didn't need it in this case. You can see that once one unit routed, all of the other ones started routing very quickly as well, and that's going to be huge casualties for the enemy. They're all kind of surrounded. Their militia will just be annihilated in that big blob of native warriors. The fight wasn't over because one unit in the centre, for whatever reason, decided to fight on, but soon the whole army converged on it and they decided that yes, this is a loss for them and a heroic victory for us, but I'm pretty sure every single battle has been registered as a heroic victory for whatever reason so far. You can see we actually lost pretty much nothing. It was a very successful fight. The enemy completely wiped aside, and now we're going to be able to auto-resolve what's left of that, of course, and take the settlement. So our offensive operation has been successful. That's all very nice. There is still that other French settlement off to the east, but we actually need some boats to go after that. There's no land connection onto Newfoundland. There is a port on the eastern part of this place we just captured, so I could use that to go and invade them if I want, but I don't really want to right now. Anyway, for the meantime, we need to focus on our defensive operations because the French do actually come and attack Quebec as expected, so we'll just have to see if my little force I've got here is enough to stop them. Really, this is just a smaller version of the battle we just saw, or at least it looks like one. We'll see it actually plays out quite differently in the next part.